In a forgotten corner of rural America, where the fog clings to the streets like a living thing, and the townsfolk glance at strangers with an almost feral suspicion, there's a secret no one dares speak aloud. They called him Papa and Brother. Names whispered behind closed doors, carved into the walls of abandoned homes, scrawled across the margins of old diaries hidden in attics. Children disappeared, only to reappear years later with strange deformities and hollow eyes, their laughter echoing like a haunting melody through the empty lanes. The town's church bells toll every morning, but behind their sacred rhythm lies a rhythm darker, a cadence that measures obedience, fear, and unspeakable acts. Locals claim it's superstition, outsiders dismiss it as rumor, but the truth is far more grotesque, far more twisted than anyone could imagine. Tonight, you will step into that fog, into the alleys where the line between family and horror has long been erased, and you will witness the legacy of a town that bred its own nightmares. Watch carefully, for once you see the truth, there is no turning back. If you want to uncover more twisted secrets hidden in the shadows, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what comes next. The story begins in the heart of Hollow Creek, a town so small it barely appeared on maps, where peeling paint and rusting gates spoke of a forgotten past, and yet every house seemed to breathe with secrets that clawed their way into the present. In the oldest part of town, a crumbling mansion stood behind overgrown hedges, home to a family whose lineage was as twisted as the branches of the oaks surrounding it. He was known as Papa, but also whispered as Brother, and no one could ever reconcile the two titles without a shiver. The townsfolk had long noticed the strange children who wandered the streets, some bearing the essay, me-angular, hollow-eyed faces, others with features so distorted they seemed almost unreal, as if genetics itself had been cruelly toyed with. Papa's house had always been a source of unease, the kind of place where dogs refused to bark and cats would disappear for days, only to return looking sickly and terrified. Those brave enough to peek through the windows spoke of faint candlelight that moved as if guided by invisible hands, and shadows that didn't belong to anyone. Rumors whispered that the family had preserved the bloodline through secret, unnatural unions, a practice so hidden that even the sheriff, a man with decades of service, dared not confront it. At night, you could hear muffled cries and low chanting from the estate, the kind of sounds that made even the most hardened locals cross the street in silence. Visitors, mostly passing travelers who had stumbled upon the town, often left with more questions than answers, some disappearing entirely. Over generations, the town had become complicit, their silence feeding the grotesque reality behind closed doors, the twisted logic of survival masking horror with polite smiles. It was a horror not of ghosts or monsters, but of flesh and blood, of families who had learned to smile in daylight while hiding nightmares in their halls. And while the main street appeared mundane with its gas stations and diner, the whispers in the wind carried stories of Papa and Brother, tales of strange rituals, secret passages, and the chilling echo of laughter that should never have existed. Hollow Creek's dark secret was not written in law books or newspapers. It was etched into the faces of those who were born into it, living reminders that some towns are haunted not by spirits, but by the choices of their own bloodline. Inside the mansion, the air was thick with the stench of decay and something far more unsettling, a lingering presence that seemed to breathe with the house itself. Papa, or Brother as some whispered, moved through the halls like a shadow, silent yet omnipresent, his eyes constantly scanning, calculating, always aware. The walls were lined with old portraits, faces twisted in ways that hinted at unnatural lineage, each generation bearing subtle but unmistakable signs of deformity, as if the bloodline had been deliberately contorted. The townspeople rarely saw him in daylight. He was a creature of dusk and night, appearing only in brief glimpses, a silhouette in a window, a fleeting shadow in a hallway, a pair of eyes watching from the attic. Inside the mansion, rooms were connected by secret passageways, hidden behind bookcases and false walls, leading to chambers where no outsider dared enter. In these hidden rooms, objects of ritual were scattered, oddly shaped dolls with human-like features, faded journals detailing strange experiments, and small cages with bones too small to identify at first glance. Whispers spoke of children being taken to these rooms, never to return the same, their innocence replaced with something darker, something that mirrored the twisted mind of Papa himself. Yet, despite the horrors, he was strangely charismatic. Those who encountered him described a hypnotic voice, a calm authority that made questioning him seem impossible. Even the townsfolk, who knew enough to fear him, would bow their heads or avert their gaze in his presence, a mixture of terror and fascination gripping them. Outside, the fog thickened as night fell, wrapping the mansion like a shroud, hiding the grotesque secrets within. The boundary between horror and normality blurred, and the townspeople's complicity grew with each passing year, feeding the sinister existence of a man who embodied both family and nightmare. Papa's power was subtle yet absolute, a dark force rooted in blood and tradition, leaving an imprint not just on his victims, but on the very soul of Hollow Creek itself. And as the wind carried muffled cries from the mansion to the empty streets, one truth became undeniable. In this town, the lines between protector and predator had long been erased, leaving only a twisted legacy for those who dared to uncover it. As the town slept under a thin veil of mist, the mansion seemed to come alive in ways that no ordinary home could. Papa, both feared and whispered about his brother, moved with an unnatural precision, almost predatory, through the hidden passageways, pausing at doors that led to rooms long abandoned by daylight. The floors creaked beneath his weight, yet no one in the house stirred. The walls themselves seemed to obey him, amplifying the faint sounds of his footsteps into a haunting rhythm that echoed through Hollow Creek. In one of the upper chambers, he kept meticulous records of the children who were born into the twisted family line, noting peculiar traits, deformities, and subtle markings that indicated which bloodlines were strongest or most useful for his dark purposes. Behind locked doors, muffled cries often escaped, though the town above rarely heard them, as the fog and the mansion's uncanny acoustics swallowed the sounds before they reached the streets. Sometimes, a brave or foolish child would peek through a crack in the door, only to meet Papa's piercing gaze and freeze, as if the shadows themselves held them in place. His influence extended beyond the mansion, seeping into the lives of the townspeople who were bound by fear, respect, and secrets too horrible to reveal. They spoke in hushed tones about the brother's eyes that seemed to see into the soul, and how children born with unusual deformities often went missing, reappearing with subtle but terrifying alterations that hinted at unnatural tampering. Even the oldest residents, who had survived decades in Hollow Creek, admitted that the man was more than human in his cunning, a living embodiment of the town's deepest shame. Outside, the fog rolled through empty streets and twisted alleys, carrying with it faint whispers that sounded almost like laughter, as if the night itself conspired with Papa to his deeds. The mansion loomed over the town, a grotesque sentinel where time and morality had no meaning, and its dark occupant ensured that the cycle of fear and secrecy persisted, generation after generation. With every secret documented, every shadow controlled, and every child altered, the legend of Papa and brother grew, not just as a man, but as a symbol of the horror that had infected Hollow Creek at its very core. Inside the mansion, Papa's presence was more than physical. It was a suffocating atmosphere, a sense that the very air had been tainted by decades of hidden horrors. The rooms seemed to remember him, the walls whispering secrets in creaks and groans, the floors holding the faint echoes of past victims. Each night, he would conduct what the townsfolk later called the watching, a ritual that involved moving silently through the corridors, observing the children and servants with a gaze so penetrating it seemed to strip away their thoughts, leaving only fear. Those unfortunate enough to meet his eyes reported a chilling sensation, as if he could peer into their souls, tracing their deepest fears and desires, twisting them into obedience without a word. The servants, most of whom had families of their own, were bound by unspoken terror, carrying out his commands with mechanical precision, their own humanity slowly eroded by years of complicity. Rumors suggested that some of the children were kept in hidden rooms for months, fed barely enough to survive, their minds warped to align with Papa's dark vision. And yet, even in the horror, there was a strange allure. Some found themselves unable to look away, drawn to the mansion by a mixture of dread and fascination, compelled to witness the acts hidden behind closed doors. Outside, Hollow Creek remained quiet, the townsfolk pretending ignorance while knowing exactly what lay behind the gates of the estate. Their silence, a tacit agreement, a protection of their own safety. Occasionally, travelers reported glimpses of a figure in the upper windows, watching, waiting, the flicker of candlelight illuminating a face that was both terrifyingly human and subtly wrong, as if nature itself had been defied. Papa's influence was subtle, pervasive, and suffocating. He was both guardian and predator, patriarch and nightmare, ensuring that no secret would ever escape while every generation continued the twisted legacy. The mansion itself seemed alive, responding to his moods, creaking with approval or protest, swallowing voices and footsteps into its shadowed depths. And as the fog rolled over Hollow Creek, carrying with it whispers of children's laughter that never belonged, one thing became clear. The terror was not only in what Papa did, but in what the town allowed, in the fear and fascination that fed a darkness older than any resident dared to name, a darkness that would continue to grow with every passing year. As the years passed, the mansion's influence over Hollow Creek deepened, and Papa's presence became a legend whispered behind trembling lips, a figure whose control stretched far beyond the estate's decaying walls. Inside, the children born into the twisted family line were subjected to increasingly bizarre and cruel experiments, their bodies and minds shaped to fulfill Papa's dark vision. Some were forced to mirror his facial features, as if he wanted to create replicas of himself to inhabit the town for generations. Others were isolated in secret rooms, for weeks, learning obedience through fear and silence, emerging with hollow expressions and unnerving stillness that made even the oldest townsfolk shiver. Yet, the town could not resist the allure of the mansion's secrets. Curiosity and dread mingled in equal measure as people stole glances at the windows, catching fleeting images of children whose eyes held something ancient and terrifying. Papa's manipulation was subtle, yet absolute, bending the will of anyone who dared to linger too close, turning observers into unwitting participants in the ongoing horror. The servants, some born within the mansion itself, became shadows of their former selves, their voices low and faces expressionless, carrying out every command with a quiet fanaticism. At night, the fog wrapped Hollow Creek in a suffocating embrace, muffling the faint cries, the distant footsteps, the soft, eerie laughter that seemed to emerge from the very walls. Outside, the town remained complicit, a silent witness to the grotesque theater unfolding within the estate, each citizen carrying the knowledge of the horrors, yet too terrified to act. The mansion loomed like a dark sentinel, its windows glowing faintly in the mist, hinting at lives lived in fear and obedience, at secrets etched into flesh and whispered through generations. Papa, both man and myths, oohed at the center of it all, a living embodiment of the town's shame, a predator whose charm and terror intertwined so seamlessly that even those who opposed him found themselves paralyzed, trapped in a web of dread and fascination. And so, the legend of Hollow Creek continued, a town that seemed ordinary in the sunlight, but concealed a heart of darkness so profound that anyone who dared to uncover it risked being consumed by the same twisted legacy, leaving behind only whispers of the man they called Papa, the man they also called brother, and the shadows of a family that should never have existed. By the time Hollow Creek reached its centennial anniversary, the mansion had become the heart of every whispered fear and morbid fascination in the town, and Papa, or brother, depending on who spoke, was no longer just a man, but a legend that haunted every conversation. Visitors who stumbled upon the mansion told stories of impossible architecture, staircases that led to nowhere, doors that opened into walls, rooms that seemed to shift when no one was looking. Inside, Papa's influence had only grown more terrifying. He would appear at the most unexpected moments, sometimes in doorways, sometimes in the shadows, his hollow eyes fixed on his subjects, as if weighing their very souls. Children born under his roof displayed traits that made outsiders uneasy, distorted facial features, unnatural posture, and an uncanny stillness, as though some hidden force had stripped them of spontaneity and replaced it with obedience. Journals hidden in the attic revealed methods of conditioning that blended superstition, fear, and meticulous observation, detailing each child's reactions, every minor change recorded as part of a dark experiment spanning generations. The townsfolk, though aware of the horrors, could do nothing. Fear had woven itself into the fabric of daily life, and even those who despised Papa found themselves hesitating at the mansion's gates, their minds paralyzed by the aura of dominance and menace he exuded. The fog that rolled in nightly seemed almost sentient, carrying whispers of long-lost children and laughter that should not have existed, masking the screams that occasionally slipped through the mansion's walls. Some residents spoke of seeing Papa in the dead of night, standing at the top of the grand staircase, silhouetted against the dim glow of candlelight, an unholy patriarch whose very presence corrupted the air around him. He was both a keeper of secrets and the embodiment of horror, a figure who had erased the line between protector and predator, man and myth. As the mansion's windows glowed faintly in the mist, and the faint cries echoed through Hollow Creek's empty streets, it became clear that the town's complicity was total, its silence a shield for the dark legacy that would continue long after any individual was gone. Papa's reign was eternal, a chilling reminder that in Hollow Creek, darkness didn't merely exist. It thrived, shaping generations, twisting families, and creating nightmares that walked in human form. The final chapter of Hollow Creek's dark saga unfolded in silence, the mansion standing like a grim monument to decades of hidden horror, its windows glowing faintly through the ever-present fog, as if the house itself were breathing. Papa, brother to some, patriarch to others, moved through the corridors with the same quiet dominance, his presence a suffocating weight that bent the very air around him. The children, now older, bore the unmistakable marks of his influence: hollowed eyes, subtly distorted features, movements precise and eerily synchronized, their innocence replaced with the cold obedience of those who had never known freedom. Occasionally, a brave outsider tried to uncover the mansion's secrets, but each attempt ended the same: disappearance, silence, and the faint echo of laughter carried on the wind. Even the townsfolk who had once whispered warnings now walked past the estate with heads bowed, their fear and fascination fused into a silent pact, ensuring that Papa's legacy would remain intact. In the deepest chambers, old journals and artifacts documented the grotesque experiments and meticulous observations that had defined generations, each page a testament to a family line corrupted by obsession and secrecy. The fog thickened as night fell, and from within the mansion came the faint, almost musical sound of children's voices. Too perfect, too uniform, too haunting to be natural. Papa's shadow stretched across the walls, long and distorted, a dark silhouette that seemed larger than life, embodying not only the terror within the house, but the town's unspoken complicity. Hollow Creek had become a town where nightmares wore human faces, where the ordinary and horrific coexisted in uneasy balance, and where Papa's influence ensured that the cycle of fear, control, and unnatural inheritance would continue indefinitely. As dawn threatened the horizon, the ancien remained, silent yet alive, a testament to a darkness that was neither supernatural nor imagined, but born of flesh, blood, and generations of whispered secrets. The legend of Papa and brother would never fade. It lingered in the fog, in the streets, in the faces of those who dared to look too closely, a chilling reminder that some towns harbor horrors, not in shadows, but in the living, breathing people who inhabit them. Hollow Creek's story did not end. It persisted, a creeping, suffocating reality, ensuring that Papa's twisted vision of family, fear, and control would never be forgotten.